What's going on, everybody? You know what time it is. Don't let the jacket fool you today. I changed it up a little bit because you know why? I just like to have fun over here. Actually, that's a lie. That's false. If you know me well enough by now, you know that I like to do two things. That's make money and have fun. Let's get into it.
My motto in life is make money and have fun. I'm on a mission to show everyone how to make money, yeah, and have fun. I'm all about making money and having fun.
I think part of the reason why I always have so much energy is because that is such a cool song. Isn't that just amazing? Coming in here, always got this little rap going on. I can see, for those of you don't have the same screen that I have, but on my screen, I can see my guests at the bottom in like these little squares down there. And every time I play that song, they're always doing like a little dance. They're doing a little shuffle, got the shoulders going on, all kinds of movement, all kinds of fun stuff, because they know that they are in the place to be on the Make Money and Have Fun show. So guess what? We're wrapping up February already at this point. I know, it's crazy. We are in the last week, the home stretch of February, and I got a really cool guest that I'm bringing on today to add to Author Month. So for those of you that don't know, I've been going live every single day this month with different authors in different genres, different industries. I mean, I got fiction authors, children's book authors, I got authors who are writing nonfiction about dealing with trauma. I got authors who are business authors, all kinds of really amazing people on here. And today, I am super excited to introduce you to my guest, Mr. Tom Dutta. What's up, Tom?
Hey, Fred, it's good to be here. Man, you didn't tell me you were spying on me, but I went from the countdown to New Year's Eve to that funky video.
Yeah, right?
Got me going.
You know that you're in a great place when stuff like that happens, right?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be on your show, Fred.
Dude, it's a pleasure to have you here, man. So we got to talk about this real quick. So I noticed that your name down at the bottom, it says Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior. Talk to us about that. What is this Quiet Warrior stuff?
Well, I guess some would say that it's counterintuitive because a warrior's got that war cry. I started my career 30 years ago as a corporate executive. You know, I didn't really know where I would be. I just came out of high school, bit of university, and stumbled into corporate America. I climbed the ladder fast, right up till president CEO at the age of 31. And honestly, Fred, when I got there, I didn't know what it was. If you've seen my recent TED Talk I did last year, I say that I am I thought I was a success chaser, but really what I discovered later in life, I was really a net self-worth chaser. But anyway, wind the clock forward, and throughout my career, you know, I coached and mentored, built and grew companies across 5 different sectors. I think I went through 11 different mergers and acquisitions. Crazy career for a young guy. And somebody said to me once, I went to Holland, Michigan, and met with another mentor of mine, John, who runs a company called the Wisdom Link. And, you know, I was there searching because after 30 years, Fred, I didn't really know where I should be after this career. I was kind of getting tired. I was traveling a lot, kind of orphaned my daughter a few years. And I went and saw John, and we had a dinner, and we were sitting riffing over dinner. And what I went to him for is he spends a day with people like me and takes the wisdom out of our head and helps us create a business platform to monetize it. So we're having a cocktail, and he says, "Tell me about you, Tom, the greatness behind the man." And I said, well, when I was little, my mom used to say, hey, you know, Tom, people just want to be around you. They just want to talk to you. And throughout my career, I started riffing with John that, you know, I guess a lot of people that I coached and mentored, and many coached and mentored me as I climbed the corporate ladder, they just would open up and tell me stuff. And you would hear all the goods and all the blood on the table that would come out from the pressures of the jobs. And I said, I guess I'm kind of like a quiet warrior. I just go on my way and quietly help people. And he said, Tom, you should hang on to that. That there might be something with that. That could be the name of your first book. And well, there came the book, The Way of the Quiet Warrior, and I branded myself the Quiet Warrior.
So cool. I love that. That's such a cool name. It's very similar, almost to Make Money and Have Fun. The story with Make Money and Have Fun was I wrote it on a piece of paper, literally on a Post-it note one day, and I just started like throwing it at the wall. I'm like, yeah, let me see how this takes. And it started getting engagement. But then for me, it was a similar moment where I actually sat down with my now good friend, Dr. Greg Reed, and I said, hey, I'm looking to transition into like a speaking, coaching kind of a world. And he's like, well, you need a name and a hook. And I'm like, what about make money and have fun? His eyes just lit up at that moment. I was like, okay, I think I found something here.
Yeah, and
Which is,
I think I watch just watching your show and knowing the narrative behind it. It's awesome. Yeah, well done on
thank you.
what you're doing over there.
Yeah, it's definitely growing. I mean, I'm really just having a blast with this show, man. I mean, it's so cool to just bring on amazing people, amazing entrepreneurs, investors, coaches, consultants, speakers, and this month, of course, authors as well. So, Tom, talk to us about your book, man. So, you wrote a book called The Way of the Quiet Warrior. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to hold it up here. I know I've got a camera on me. There it is, The Way of the Quiet Warrior. Probably the light is a little tough to see it. It's a bit better. And if it's okay, Fred, I want to just tell the backstory a bit with this and
Please
sort of
do.
cut me short if I'm rambling too much. But there's a bit of a
All you,
story.
man. Take it.
All right, man. There's a bit of a story behind it. First of all, to all of you out there, the biggest thing that holds many of us back from writing is just fear of the unknown. In a case like mine, fear of writing my story and putting myself out there, because I went real vulnerable in my book, which, by the way, is a trait of a good leader. Vulnerability is a strength. It's not a weakness. The second one is, how do I do it? And it's going to cost me some money. And so I was always getting in my way. And when I went to Holland, Michigan, I mentioned my mentor, John. As I was leaving that room that day, he handed me a book. It was his book, and it said on the front, Thought Leader. And I went, wow, what is a thought leader? And I kind of knew that term. And he said, you need to write a book, Tom. He said, because you're a thought leader. So everyone, a thought leader, sees the world through a lens that is unique to them. They're an authority. If you look at the word author, the word authority comes from that. And so I said, okay. So I got on a plane. I came back home, and Fred, I was kind of down about it because I went, okay, I'm back home. I'm broke. I don't have $50,000 that I heard you need to write a book. And where do I start? The next part of the story is very deep. So I went online and I was creative and I Googled author, and a bunch of authors popped up. And this one woman caught my attention, and I clicked on her profile, and the first page of her book came up, and it was called Black and Blue Sorry. And I read it and I was horrified, but at the same time I was motivated and excited. What I read was chilling. She wrote a story, a book that was published about how she was in an arranged marriage, and her arranged husband tried to murder her in front of her kids. And I went, that is incredible. So I stalked her on LinkedIn, and I said, I got to meet you. I'm a wannabe author, and I need somebody to mentor me, and maybe we can have coffee. And Fred, for weeks, she wouldn't engage. Finally, she engaged, and I met her at a Starbucks not far from where I live here in Vancouver, Canada. And as she walked in, I looked closely at her when she sat down. There's something different about her. And she started talking to me, and she said, I love your work. I've been looking at what you're doing. And she says, you need to write a book. She said, because not many CEOs would stand on a stage or write a book about their struggles in their life and their successes, particularly like you have, Tom. And so that's how it started. She said, and to all those wannabe authors, just get a pen and paper and start writing. And she said, if you're not writing and you don't create a manuscript, nothing's going to happen. And then I looked over at her, and she said, Tom, see these little marks beside my eyes? And she pointed, and there were these little slits beside her eyes, scars. And she said, that's where he tried to gouge my eyeballs out. And then she said, look at my face, and it looked like the Elephant Man. She was a beautiful woman, but she said, I have 7 plates of metal in my face. This was all part of her story, and so her purpose behind her book was to share that story, not for pity, but to free women who are in abusive marriages. And she has been on a journey with that for years. She's written her second book. So she really inspired me. And I'm not saying you have to have a book that talks about trauma, everyone, but find a mentor, somebody who's done it before, and follow them. And so going back to, Fred, my book, by the way, I can't read. I'm going to fall on my sword. I get bored. I honestly have a graveyard of books until audiobooks came out. Then I started listening, and I can't get through books. It bounces all over the page. I deal with a bit of anxiety and a little bit of unfocusedness in myself, and so I found a book years ago by Patrick Lencioni, if you know that name. And everybody, he wrote the book, Five Temptations of a CEO and Five Dysfunctions of a Team. I read that book and I zipped through it, and it was literally the fastest read. And here's why. Because our brains are wired for narrative, for storytelling. We remember stories. That's why I can remember Star Wars like I watched it yesterday, and yet I saw it in my dad's pickup truck in the early, I think, 70s or 80s at a drive-in theater. But I remember, Luke standing there watching over the burning bodies of his grandparents, his light speeder over here, the moon hovering in the background. I can remember like yesterday, and the reason why is that Spielberg and Lucas and the likes created their movies with the hero's journey narrative, which is they put us into the story. That's why I can remember it. So I said, I have an idea here. And I had a buddy in Boston, Mass, who was into publishing, and I called him. I said, what do you think of this idea if I write a business book, but I do it like no other book, where I create fables or stories and I create business content? That way I can put the audience in the hero's journey, and it'll be a fun book and engaging. And he said, I think you're onto something. And so that's how I wrote the book. There's 12 chapters. 6 are actually stories of people I've worked with or come across through my journey in becoming a business leader. And I fictionalize them to protect the identities. For example, one of the chapters is called The Axeman, and it's about a toxic leader in a company here, and he hired me as his general manager. And he was a bad dude when he was not in himself, and he wanted to fire this other fellow in his company. So we wrote this chapter called The Axeman, and we went deep into the motives behind that and how I actually worked with him using my own success and failure in my career to actually change his character in some way. And he never fired the guy. So that's what we did with the book. There's 6 phases of business in it. I created a 6-step, what I call transformational program, and it's now part of my coaching. And it takes us from really what I call phase 1, the self. What are your strengths, limitations? What are your character flaws? Who are you really? What are your motives? Before we can do anything in leadership, Fred, we have to figure out all those things, because somewhere inside every leader is a blind spot, or what I call a thinking trap, that was usually put there when they were younger by somebody else, that can either make them successful or get in the way. I always like to say it's like climbing Mount Everest. If you have a thinking trap in your brain, well, forget about getting to the top. You won't even make the base camp. And so that's what we did. The book has had great success. It's gone #1 in a couple countries. We actually beat out on the day we went #1 the likes of Gary Vaynerchuk, Damon John, even my mentor, Tony Robbins. And I say that with humility, because they won't take that away from me. But on the day, we actually tracked our success. And today I use this as a tool. It's a workbook. I use the book in coaching when I coach business leaders of all kinds. And I'm working on my second book's being published this year. And I have one more thing I want to surprise you with, and that's the book is being made into a feature film. I'm a producer in that, and we're actually, we have the screenplay done, and I would say we'll be filming it in Canada, US, starting next year. Now, to get everybody excited, you don't need to write a book to be a bestseller. That's kind of stressful. It's like, how do you do that? Oh man, I can't be like Tom. Well, it all started with a thought of writing, and somebody said, just do it. And it led to somebody in the US getting my book, reading it, who is a film director, and connecting back to me saying, your story's powerful. Have you ever thought of turning it into a feature film? So magic happens when you write, and I think every child, Fred, should be a reader. And there's a great saying, leaders are readers. If you're out there and you're a leader, I listen to 4 books a month. You got to be listening to and reading all the great books out there, because it'll literally change your life.
Absolutely. I love that. That's an amazing story. The interesting thing about what I'm doing this month is that everybody that comes on is so different. Like last week on Saturday, I had a lady who wrote a book about, overcoming trauma and that sort of thing. And then you're coming in here in more of a business-based, frame where you're coming from, which is more what I'm used to chatting about and used to dealing with. But it's a different way of going about it, where you actually embedded that story narrative in there.
Yeah.
Which I think is absolutely genius, doing it that way.
Yeah, thank you. There's a reason why I wrote the book that way, Fred. If you read the one of the chapters is called "The Boy," and that's actually a narrative or a story of my childhood. And while I don't stay in the past, there's no rearview mirror in my office. Here's what happened. I came out of a home. My dad was a great man. He passed away 3 years ago unexpectedly, but my dad was a military commanding officer in the British Army, and then stayed here in the Canadian Forces. Same, but he became a violent dude. He was drunk, sloppy drunk. He had affairs. He destroyed our home. It fell apart. I became the man of the house. My mom was always depressed, and I saw a lot of things that I can't tell you about online because it would be horrible. But there was something in me that took me out of that home when I was 18 to live on my own, and I went into the world of business because I was encouraged to do so. By the way, here's a teaching moment, I call it, for your show. Just because somebody says you should be in a certain career, that doesn't mean where you belong. Many of us end up in careers because our parents or somebody in school, like a teacher, influenced us. That's a big part of what's in my book. It took me all a lifetime to figure out that I wasn't in the right place. Anyway, I got into corporate and I started applying the rules that I used in a toxic family as a leader. And I climbed the corporate ladder fast. At 31, I mentioned, became that CEO. But here's the thing: I was winning awards. I mean, I was driving. I was never a harsh leader, but I started getting feedback that I had trouble keeping my team together, building relationships deeply with people, and yet that's my natural personality, is to build relationships and get things done through people. I did a lot of personality science on myself, so something was missing, and it took me, a while. And here's what happened one day. I got my first top job, as I mentioned, CEO. The company was it was a global company, an 8 billion conglomerate, and I had been given the job to run the Canadian side of it. And they gave me a coach, and they paid this woman something like 50,000 US to follow me around, listen to me, take feedback. And I went, wow, why so much, and why? And I was against the whole idea because I had an ego. I had an ego. I didn't check it at the door. It was all about me and significance and all these things that later I realized were not really me. And she sat down with me in a boardroom one day and she said, if you want to be the man, you want to, lead this company, you might have to be aware of some changes you have to make. And Fred, I was in denial. I thought, get out of here. So we were in a boardroom one day and she gave me some really tough feedback. It was the first 360 feedback, and that means feedback involving others. And she said that, sometimes people are saying you're grandstanding and you're arrogant and you're insensitive. And I'm going like, who are you talking about? Well, finally, after she pounded on me in that room, she became fairly aggressive, and all of a sudden I broke. That was a changing moment in my life. I literally broke and started to tear up. And you know what I said to her? I said, can you stop? Because you kind of sounding like my dad. And that was a clue, Fred. It took me 20 more years to discover that the subconscious brain that I have had wiring in it, a thinking trap, that anybody who appeared aggressive or assertive, my brain went, that person looks like my father, who I was a black and blue kid. I took the brunt of the abuse in the home. So I didn't know this was going on. This was a thinking traps many leaders have, blind spot. So when I was in a room and I could have a boardroom or a meeting with you and a bunch of my team, if you were becoming obnoxious or arrogant or doing things that my brain thought were like that, I would go into fight or flight. So I'd either run over you and just keep driving forward and I wouldn't really feel, or I would run away. And so this is what was happening in my career, and I actually self-sabotaged some of my success. I had everything. My wife will tell you we had a great lifestyle, but I kept running into this thing I couldn't figure out. And so it was through the creation of the book, after I unwired all this, Fred, and there's a lot I did. It involved brain science, psychological training. I continued to be a top executive, but I totally transformed. I changed two things, and I won't tell you what those are today. Maybe that's a teaser to get the book and come back again. But I changed two things, and it took me 10 years to research the book, to do all this work. And in the book, I have a blueprint on actually going through the same, what I call hero's journey, or the same process I did, to find out the thinking trap, find out why you're successful, and maybe you're doing well, but something is missing it. Something's inside saying I'm searching still for something and I don't know what it is. that the one thing I was searching for all my life was the acceptance and love of my father. It sounds kind of weird, but my father, the way he showed love was to expect straight A's and accomplishments. And so I went out and did what I kept doing, overachieving, the biggest paycheck. Whenever I built my company, the goals were bigger. And then I was in a job for many years, and then I got bored, and it was me looking to go somewhere else to get more job, more paycheck, more stuff. And they say a quality of life doesn't come from a quantity of stuff. So this is really what I see. I started coaching 7-8 years ago in my own practice. I built a character development company called Create, and it's an international company. And I've been coaching and also doing workshops and things. There's more to my platform than that, though. But I've come across leaders, and in the cone of silence, where you have them and you build that trust, the blood on their shirt, it starts seeping out on the table, all these stories. Trouble at home with the wife, difficulty with the children. Boss doesn't like me. Nobody can understand my vision. And it all comes back to really all you need is within you. But a lot of business leaders are on this treadmill going to and from work. They're grinding away, and to give them credit, they're under a heck of a lot of pressure at that level. I got to tell you this, that I would go to work and I would have to put on many hats. So I'd show up to work and I had 5 vice presidents reporting to me. I would have to put on my technology hat, my HR hat, my operations hat when I engaged them. And then I had to deal with the frontline staff and managers and supervisors. So I had to take off my leader hat. And a leader, by the way, my definition is a leader's job. Number one job is to create other leaders. A manager is managing, but an executive is creating a vision and creating leaders to follow it. It's a very different hat. So then I put on that hat to go to a board meeting. I mean, it's crazy, but this is why our brains are built. I say it's like a 1-ton pickup truck. If the payload gets to 5 tons, your brain's going to blow a gasket. Eventually, it'll explode. And eventually, what happens is leaders break down. So there's a whole lot of things in my book about body, mind, soul, and self-care. But before we get to any of that, we've got to go back to doing all that early work. And here's the thing: most leaders, I'd say less than 5%, take the time to do that, not for their own fault. They're just busy, all excuses, and they don't make time for it until maybe it's too late. And after I wrote the book, a couple years later, something dramatic again happened, which is maybe the next chapter, if you want to talk about that led to my recent TED Talk, which is also the extension. Probably the next book from this one will contain my current story.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. So for me, I'm a big fan of speaking, if you can't tell. One of the reasons why I like to love my own show. So talk to us. What does it really take to land a TED Talk, to be on a TED stage and to stand in the center of that red dot?
Yeah. Well, first thing is, that's awesome. I just did a live stream. It's on my platform. You can find it on my feeds, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. Just released it, called 3 Tips to Getting a TED Talk Opportunity. And I'd also like to share with your audience that I'm the past speaker ambassador for TEDx Bear Creek Park, which is their production. Their first virtual online TED event is this March 27th. And it's free. When I did my live stream, I said, if you want to be a TED speaker, there's 3 things that I recommend. One is to get the book by Chris Anderson. He's the CEO of TED. And TED is based out of New York. It's global. And TEDx, the X means local stage. When TED wanted to scale worldwide, it couldn't do it by itself, so it issued licenses. So TEDx Bear Creek Park is in Surrey, British Columbia, where I am. And so you can go to their website, by the way, and get the registration link, and you can watch the TED event. It's 3.5 hours, 12 speakers, 4 energizers. It's going to be amazing, and we're expecting 10,000 people from around the world to be watching it. So again, you'll find more about that on my social media feeds. But I said to everybody and to your audience, one is read Chris Anderson's book and discover why you want to do a TED Talk. Listen, if it's for fame, if it's to promote your book, it's for ego, forget about it. Because it took me twice to qualify for mine, but the first time I did mine, I'm going to be vulnerable here, I asked for feedback of my my coach, and she said, well, you had a good talk, but they didn't like you that much because I talked about my book and I talked about my career. You see, TED is about coming up with a single idea worth sharing, an idea that nobody's thought of before, or maybe an idea with a twist. And it can't be about you. When you're on the red carpet, a 9-foot diameter carpet, you have to plant in the minds of your audience, and in my case there was 1,000 people staring at me, a thought that will get in all of their minds simultaneously around the room in the first 2 minutes. And then you've got to hold them, and at the end you've got to finish with a shift in their thinking where they may go out in the world and it may change the way they think or inspire them to do something. And that's the power of TED. So get Chris's book, read it, because he talks about that. The second step is it's like going for a job interview, Fred. If you go for a job interview and they say, so what do you know about our company? You say, well, I don't know. Don't really know anything. So I would say go and attend a TED event. And in my first audition, I went into a room because I was invited by somebody to apply, but I had never seen a TED event. But here's the thing. If you apply and you have it in your soul that you've actually been to an event, you've seen it, you feel the energy, you understand what happens in that room, the TED curators, they call it, they curate the speakers, will buy into you first, your energy, your passion, your why. And so that's why I'm saying Bear Creek Park on the March 27th. We're telling everybody if they want to attend it, because right there is a free event. It's a world-class event because many people don't always have a stage in their backyard. The third thing, besides having the passion, having known what an event maybe looks and feels like, is find that idea. And the thing is, it isn't hard, or it is hard to do. And my suggestion is meet people who are linked to your local TED stage. So try to research and Google and find your local TED stage. Even if there wasn't one in your community, there's generally one not far from where you are. Meet people and get a TED speaker from the past, for example, me, and interview us and say, how did you find that idea? And really, I worked with a coach. My stage had 6 months of coaching involved for free. And I worked with my coach, and it was going back and forth through Zoom and through a bit of coaching. I came up with several ideas, but we landed on my idea, which my TED Talk was called How Leaders Can Lift the Stigma of Mental Health. We landed on that topic because my coach actually saw vulnerability in me and pulled it out of me. So you can't always find your topic alone, so find a mentor. So those 3 tips will get you into the room to apply, and then the rest is on you. Once you get accepted, your application goes in, they give you an audition. There's usually 25 people or so. And so, for example, in my first application, there was 150 applications. I was shortlisted at 25. They call you in, and you don't have to have your talk written, but you have to tell them, what are you going to do? And if you go in there and you're not prepared or you don't have your idea, you won't make it to the short list. After that audition, they basically will let you know who the 12 are. Our stage has 12 speakers, 12 to 14. And if you make it, congratulations. If you don't, my advice, everybody, try again. Because if your why is deep enough, you're going to keep trying till you get on that stage. And the last exciting thought for all of you is everybody listening to me can do a TED Talk. There's a myth, everyone, that you can be a speaker. I'm actually taking singing lessons because I want to learn to sing a song. I play guitar. And I thought you had to be amazing and have a natural gift at birth, but you don't. So to be a speaker, you can do it. You speak all day long, and you speak in public, so you talk to people. Fred, the other thing I got to say about the TED thing is it's very, very different than speaking. I've spoken all my life as a corporate leader, in communities and boardrooms and marketing and events. But everybody, it's different with TED because you have to stay confined to a 9-foot radius carpet. You can't move around on the stage. And so when you see a lot of TED productions, the speakers are wandering all over the place and their hands are going, they haven't had good coaching. You literally have to stay in that confined space, and you have to learn to teach your body from the waist up how to actually act out your talk without moving your legs and your arms a lot. It's crazy, but you learn some new skills. And in my talk, if you see it, I acted out one scene, which was riding a bicycle for 2 days, 225 kilometers, or 150 miles in the Americans. and it was called The Ride to Conquer Cancer. And I acted that out riding my bicycle, but I learned how to do it without using my legs. So it's small things like that. And then what do you do with your hands? A lot of people do all this. No, it's distracting. And the other thing that was cool was when I was doing my rehearsal, my coach said, if I turn off your voice and watch you, Tom, what you do with your body has to be marrying up with what you do when your voice is going. I went, wow. So we did it the first time, and my body was doing something very different than what I intended with my voice. So I'll say this, if you get a good stage and you go through it, you will come out as a world-class speaker, somebody who will be able to now truly go on a world stage as a international or a top speaker. I thought I knew how to speak, but man, did I learn a lot. And now my speaking fees, Fred, you talk about making money. I charge $7,500 for a keynote, and with my book, if you have a book, everybody, it doesn't have to be a business book. You can package it into your keynote talk. And the conference, even though it's COVID, there are virtual events, but the place is going to explode when COVID normalizes. There's a lot of money to be made if you do it for the right reason. Fred, I was talking to somebody else the other day, and they said, here's what you need to do if you want to be a voice, you want to be an influencer. Have a book, do public speaking, and have a platform. And so like you've done, Fred, which is amazing to me, your platform. So my platform is I have a podcast. I'm launching another one about mental health. I'll soon have the movie, which is just a bonus, but I've got my coaching company and my online platform, and I've got a tribe. But those three things go together. So I highly recommend, if you are doing a book, then definitely, even if you go to Toastmasters and just hang out and learn some basic talking, it's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. For me, it's interesting because I've always just really liked public speaking and always been really good at it. So it's kind of like one of those funny things where I don't completely understand people that aren't good at it because it's just something that's come naturally to me. But like you said, yes, it's not only is it, something that's natural, but it's also trainable. Just like anything else that we do, it all comes down to just training and skill. And the more time we put into something, the better we're going to get at it. I used to say that as a martial arts instructor when I was younger to the kid students. I said, look, you can't practice something and get worse. We have good days and bad days, but if you practice over and over and over again, you're only going to get better at that point. So I love this. This is right in my hometown, doing the keynote speakings, doing the TED Talks, writing the book, all that kind of stuff. I've written 3 books at this point just because I absolutely love it, and I have so much to say that I feel like people need to hear it. Tom, this has been awesome, man. This is so cool.
Yeah, you have great presence. You said something interesting. I didn't. I thought I was good at speaking, but here's the thing: until you have a professional speaking coach, my speaking coach actually for TED happened to be won the number 2 in the world for the Toastmasters, and I was intimidated, and until you know what your shortcomings are, you just don't know. So I recommend for everybody, even if we feel we're a good speaker, there's usually 1 or 2 things we'll learn that can change the game. Fred, I mentioned that there was another chapter of the story. I just want to, because I know we have limited time, but I want to just get into this for a moment, if you will. That, by the way, I'm wearing a baseball cap today for a reason, so I don't show up with my ball cap on very often, although it's Seattle Seahawks, and great stories of driving down to Seattle with my boys and my daughter when they were here, watching the amazing team down there. But on August 25th, 2018, I was doing the Ride to Conquer Cancer. A friend of mine who runs an engineering firm here in Vancouver hired me to coach his executive team. So I did a 4-hour workshop. I got to know him, and we were sitting having a beer one day in the summer on my patio. And he told me about his daughter. She died from leukemia when she was 11. And he had done, this year he was talking to me about his 10th year doing this ride, which he put a team together of 80 riders. That's 80. And the ride was 2 days. 100 kilometers from Vancouver to what's called Chilliwack. And then we would go from there to Hope, British Columbia, another 125 kilometers. and this is surrounded by the mountains and the highways. Pretty tough riding. 2 days, 225 kilometers or 150 miles on your bike. Really, really amazing, hard to do. You have to train for it. So I said, I'm in. And my wife lost her best friend to leukemia, when her childhood girlfriend. And I had a couple other people hanging around me that had kicked cancer. So I'm always the Tough Mudder kind of guy. Do something you've never done before each year. So I said, I'm in. I didn't even have a bike. So I went and borrowed my bike from a buddy of mine, started training, and I arrived at the ride in peak condition. So we kicked off, and I did the 100K. It was a bit rainy and cold, but I felt great. My wife brought her SUV and kind of followed along. And the first night of the ride, many of us, 10 of us, stayed. There's base camp, which is tents. You stay in that. Well, we stayed in a motel, 10 of us, and the team captain. Stepped into the shower, and my feet lost out from under me. The tub was very slippery. Before I knew it, I fell backwards, literally on my back. And I'm a pretty tall guy. The momentum drove my head into the basin of the tub like a battering ram. I cracked it, the tub, and I blacked out. Came to, my wife found me, and I'd suffered, I don't know what it was at the time, but I didn't sleep that night. I had leaning against the headboard in the room, and I had to get up at 5 a.m. to go ride another 100K. Now, I'm pretty stubborn, and that's the quiet warrior in me, and I remember saying to Anna, my head's pounding, I just probably got a bad headache. And I said, people with cancer, they don't have a choice. So I called my team captain. I told them what happened. They said, there's emergency services along the way every 20 kilometers. Tom, if you feel anything, stop. Well, Fred, I got on my bike. Anna gave me a bag of Advil, and I chewed that along the way. I was slow. I came in probably last. I got my medal, and I said, take me home. Got in the car. She drove. That night, we were watching TV, and my daughter stood up, walked by me. She was home from university, and she said, Dad, there's dried blood on your head and some cuts. Anna looked, and she said, oh, boy, Tom, you better get your ass into the doctor. So I went in, and that was the beginning of the new chapter. I suffered a serious brain injury. This 2.5 years now where I've been recovering. For a year, I couldn't do anything. My life stopped. Imagine the platform you've built comes to a halt. That's what happened. My eyes wouldn't work because I fell on the vision center of my head. I slipped into depression. I had my first suicidal thoughts, which I'd never experienced before, and I needed help. And this went on and on until I finally engaged a team of doctors, specialists. I'm 2.5 years now, and I'm still coming through it. Part of my journey had me go into Costco as a produce stalker, 6 to 10:30. Here's a CEO executive type stocking produce in the cooler just to be physical and stay out of the rumination and depression. Today, I do a side hustle waiting tables at a restaurant. A CEO, buddy of mine, bought a restaurant, said he wanted help turning it around. I had to learn a lot, including my faith. I went through a whole bunch of humility walking into those other jobs. Some of my CEO friends say, I would never do that. Well, you got to get over yourself. But I've learned a lot. In the last 2 years, that's where my TED idea came from. If you watch my talk, and I want everybody to please honor it and watch it and share it, the topic, how leaders can lift the stigma of mental health, I make a complete revelation of my life and that's what happened as a business leader and how I actually got through it and how now I see business from the ground floor up in a very different way. And I call out the people who have the megaphone, the leaders of society, to actually lift the stigma, not the people on the ground floor. And I experienced at Costco and these other places what it's really like to work in a place where there's stress and pressure, but the people above, they never talk about it. That's where the stigma, in my view, originates. So right. I'm coming out of that chapter now. The next this year will be significant for me. I have to prove to myself I can do my work again. I do my podcast still, but I have to pace myself and have brain rest time when I do it. But I'm back, and I may have some permanent disability with my eyes. I don't know yet. I still get headaches when I stay too much on the screen. But I want to tell everybody and inspire you with this, that when darkness comes, and it will, when there's adversity in your life, it's what you do with it and the strength you gain through it that makes you stronger afterwards. And I found something I never really looked at before, which is faith. I became very faith-based. I have a little cross on my neck I wear. I did a lot of praying. I said, God, please just open a door and show me where I need to be. And the one thing I never did was try to figure it out, because brain injuries take time. And by trusting my faith, that's what I'm adding to my next piece of work. The Way of the Quiet Warrior didn't have my faith in it. And when my father passed away unexpectedly, I was estranged from him for a decade. I actually met him for coffee at Starbucks before this accident. It was actually 6 months before the ride. And Dad and I agreed to have coffee once a month after that. And then before I could, he passed away. So that 1 year, I believe God stripped me of my father. He let us forgive and heal when I met him for coffee, because, he had a lot to say to me. Everything fell off my shoulders. It was like the weight was gone. And then I thought, man, my business, my platform, I was making a lot of money in my company. And that's something I'm going to encourage everybody. If you create a platform, even with a book and a program of some kind, you can monetize it. You can monetize it to the tune of $1 million or more. You just scale it. That's what I built. And we're on our way to having a multi-million-dollar platform. And then God again stepped in and said, I got to make you have this fall and lose your faculties, Tom, because you got to learn more. And what I learned through that was about mental health and about leadership in mental health and how we play a role. And I made a bold statement in my TED Talk. I want to just share this. You'll see it in the talk. It goes like this. It's a major line. When leaders fail to take care of their own mental health, they undermine the importance of the mental health of all the people that they're leading. Leaders, we need to show that our strength is in our stories of struggle, not in our silence. And we need to create a courage culture. So part of my platform now is still doing what I'm doing, but I'm adding one more component, which is a mission to lift the stigma, but teach leaders how to do it and how to create a company that has a culture of courage. Because by building relationships when I was on the ground floor, and I'd never seen the ground floor because I fast-tracked to the penthouse, I call it, by making relationships with a lot of people over the last 3 years working in these side hustles, man, I finally realized why they don't talk about when they're not feeling very good. And it's not about them. So thanks for letting me share that story. It's an emotional one, but I thought that you needed to know that last part of it.
It's everybody has their story to tell is what I feel like it comes down to. And like your own, some of them are more traumatic than others. Some of them are heavier than others. But at the end of the day, it really just comes down to how we perceive it, what it means to us, and how we can share that with the world. Like I said, Tom, this has been amazing, man. I'm so excited to have you on here. You're definitely, one of my favorite human beings. And we got to let everybody know, I think this is the first international show that I'm doing with somebody
It is
from Canada, which
Absolutely.
is awesome. You win the award, Tom. Way to go.
All right.
And
you just became international. You got that award, buddy.
Look at that. I know, man. We're doing big things over here. So listen, let's wrap it up here. What's the last piece of advice you want to give to our guests before you say goodbye today?
Yeah. There's a study done by a Canadian study, and it was to 90-year-olds, 90, and they asked them, what are your 3 top regrets at that age? And when all the responses came in, Fred, the top 3 in no order of importance were, I didn't take enough risk, I didn't reflect enough, and I didn't leave a big enough contribution or legacy. So my question to everybody, my call to action is, think about how much you reflect. Have you taken enough risk? And what beyond your work and your family, what is your legacy? That would be my advice.
I love that. That's really, really amazing. I love it. Tom, thank you so much for being here. To everybody who's tuning in with us, make sure wherever you're listening to this at, show us some love. Give us some subscriptions, some reviews. Share it with your friends. Let them know about this because this is amazing stuff going on here. Tom, it's been a blessing, man. We'll have to do it again soon.
Absolutely, man. Good luck to you and everybody. Thanks for having me on the show today.
You got it. See you guys.